All right, get set and ready to roll. Here we go. All right. Whoop. Start it up. Wrong slide. Let's go ahead and try this one more time. All right, here we go, for real this time. Hello, and welcome to Designer's Corner. I'm your host, Josh, and today we'll be learning some Figma. Yes, that's right. I've been a UX designer for over a decade now. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter. And so, from last week, we went over some Google Slides, and we checked out specifically themes in Google Slides. And we've realized that we can save time by utilizing fonts, colors, layouts, these things, all reusing these components through Google Slides and their theme layouts allows us to be more productive with our designing process. And not only that, we can ensure that we're not touching things that shouldn't be touched. So if you're feeling like this when you're working in Google Slides, it's usually because the element that you're trying to change is part of the themes, the theme layouts. And so unless you have placeholders, then the other elements are just going to be fixed where they are. And this is really good because this allows us to create reusable content. It allows us to create intricate designs that other people can't mess up. It allows us to adhere to corporate standards and brand guidelines and so on and such forth. And it gives us a general launch point that we can, then build off of, so we don't have to keep remaking our designs and our slides every single time. So when not to use a theme is when you want to control an element. So, if you want to add more pictures, text, etc. to your design, go ahead and, add those elements. And if it's a one-off type of thing, then, and it doesn't conform with the rest of the slides, then go ahead and, use your own freeform slide, just create a new blank slide and go ahead and style it in a similar manner, but different than the rest. Also, if you just want to take the hard way around, then go ahead and don't use themes. But otherwise, for the rest of us who are trying to be productive and efficient, we're going to use themes. All right, this week in Designer's Corner, that's right, it's Figma. We are working with Figma. And finally, after so many weeks of build-up, we're finally here. We're finally getting to it. So let me go ahead and just make sure I have my windows ready. Go ahead and increase this. That should work fine. All right, so the first thing you want to do in order to get started with Figma is go to figma.com, and you can use any of the multiple get started buttons. They have one in the top right corner, get started for free, the black one, get started, and there'll even be probably a prompt for a single sign-on. So go ahead and click any of these to get started. Go ahead and log in either by logging in using an existing account or by creating a new account. Just enter your email, password, use a single sign-on like as in Google, your Google single sign-on, and that will allow you to access it a little easier. Google kind of integrates, lets your Google profile become your sign-on, blah, blah, blah. I don't know exactly how it works in the back end, but it makes it a little bit easier so you don't have to create a new login every single time. Now, Figma is browser-based, and being browser-based, it means that it works basically in the cloud, and in the cloud means, it's going to save all your changes. That's what's really cool about Figma. It automatically saves your changes, and you're able to access it with your browser, Firefox, Google Chrome, Safari, anything like that. But I do recommend that you download the app. And, Figma has a way, they've used their own hotkeys and stuff like that. So it's pretty good about not bumping into any of the hotkeys that the browser will probably use. But, go ahead and use the app anyway. Download the app anyway. Why? Because it's free. So go ahead and download it. It won't cost you anything. And it's a little bit of a nicer experience than having to work with all the tabs in the browser. So it just makes it a little bit easier. So now, how to do that? You want to click on products, and then you'll click on downloads, and then you can download for your respective application source, or your respective computer. So, iOS or Windows. And once you do download it, then go ahead and fire it up, either by downloading the app and firing up the app, or if you simply signed in via the website, then it'll probably bring you right to the interface, the command control, the control center here. And what that will look like is something similar to this. So you'll have different areas. Primarily, what we're going to look at is the top left. To begin with, you have your home and community. That's the little home icon and the little globe icon. Anytime you want to come back to this area where we're looking right now, just click on the home button and it'll take you to that. The community is more for like forums and plugins. We'll get into that at a later time, but that is something that's pretty cool, especially if you're more integrated into Figma. For me, I'm more of just a designer, so I just kind of use the plugins that other people use. But home is a good one to know if you ever need to get back to the screen. You'll also have your account name, so the info for your account, like settings, and you can change from light mode to dark mode in here. That's available right there where the name is located. You'll also have your favorite files section. So this is like a list of whatever files you favorite. So that's a good one to do and to use in case you want to have a little more easy access. Sometimes, between your different teams, your different accounts, and your drafts, and then not only the team accounts and the teams. So, it gets a little confusing in the naming of how Figma does this. I don't think they have the best naming conventions ever, but the file folder structure is fairly good. So we'll continue to look at that. But this one is the favorites. After that, you have your teams. Now, teams are collaborative spaces where you're able to invite other people to, contribute to your different projects that you're working on. Within the teams, you'll have projects, and within the projects, you'll have the actual design files. So this is where you can find that stuff. Create a team, invite people to be on that team, create a folder inside of that will house the different design documents that you have. So it's again, this is where we get a little bit confusing, but it's okay. We'll explore that in just a minute. In the top right, you have your design file, and Figma Jamboard, and also an import in case you need to import from like Sketch or anything previously. But for the most part, we're just going to take a look at the design file for right now. It's a more powerful version of the Fig Jamboards, but the Fig Jamboards are worth, if you're doing something a little lighter than design, they're definitely worth taking a look at. They have their own powerful features separate from the design file, but we're going to be looking at the design file. So you can also click the little plus icon in the tab bar to create a new document as well. And if you don't see the documents up in the top right corner, then sometimes they're located in the page here. And if you look in kind of this section, kind of near the drafts in the left-hand pane, you might find it over there for design file, Fig Jam, etc. So click either of those buttons, any of those three, or wherever it might be located, and that's how you can create a new document. So before we do that, again, I just want to specify that Figma's file structure is a little bit confusing between the teams, which are spaces. The teams don't hold any document per se. You can't put stuff into the team except for the projects. So the team is going to be your cabinet. The projects are going to be the folders in the different cabinet drawers. And then within those folders, you're going to have the actual document files. So we create teams, create projects, and then we create the design files that go into the projects, which are inside of the teams. So when you create your document, you're going to get kind of a blank interface that looks like this. It might give you some pop-ups and stuff like that. They'll let you know you can rename the file, you can move it to different projects, and as well, they give you a nice little consolidated toolbar. So Figma, I think, is pretty good about this. Sketch is also pretty good, but unlike the complexities that we kind of see in Google Slides or Photoshop or any of the other types of programs that might have a little more complexity, a couple more tools, and sprockets and spriggets going on here and there, Figma gives you all your tools kind of in just one section, and it already has the most useful tools kind of highlighted: a cursor, a frame, a square or shape, pen, text, this little foursquare looking icon, that's components, a hand which allows you to move around, and a speech bubble for comments. It differs whether you're in editing mode or view only access mode. So if you don't have all the tools there, and let's say you're looking at someone else's Figma file, then you might be only in view only mode, and so you won't have access to all the tools. Below the tools on the left hand side, you'll have your layers and assets panel, so you'll be able to see your layers, see your assets, and there's also one more that's next to it. It says page 1 there, your pages. So you can create different pages so you don't have to have 1,000 artboards littered around one page. On the opposite side, on the right hand side, you'll have your properties panel. So this holds the design, which is properties for different stuff like your artboard, your shapes that you create, your text, change the color, change the size, change the positioning, etc. like that. Prototype is for creating your final prototype, your click-throughs, your journeys. So that's something that we'll explore at a little bit of a later time as well. But, for right now, let's go ahead and get right into our demo here. So we're going to take a look at the Figma layout. So as I mentioned previously, you may or may not have many of these showing up in your Figma. So I already have a couple of design files showing up here, and currently I am in the drafts. So if I want to, I can change to some different teams that are already created there. But for right now, I'm in the drafts, and we're going to go ahead and click on New Design File. Once you create a new design file, you're into Figma, and you'll be able to kind of navigate around. So as I mentioned before, we have our Move tool, Move and Scale, Frame, Selection, and Slice, our Rectangle tool with Line, Arrow, Ellipse, Polygon, Star, and there's a placeholder for images if you want to bring those in, the Pen and the Pencil tool, a Type tool, which allows us to type, your Components widget, which you can access either by clicking on the little Foursquare icon or pressing Shift-I, and that will bring it up as well. Let me go ahead and one moment. Activate. All right, so now again, Shift-I will bring up the panel. So with that, you'll be able to access components. Components are going to be libraries of reusable assets that will help us to design. You can access plugins, and we'll go over some plugins again at a later time, but that's something useful as well. Widgets are something that I've never really explored before, but this is something that could be useful to you as well. Hand tool just allows you to move around, so I'm not moving the type that's there, I'm actually moving myself around in the space. So that's how that works, as well as comments. Leave a comment, and then when you press enter, then other people can view the comment that you left here, and they'll be able to see, and you can even mark it as resolved and so forth, and then it will show up in different areas so you can see what's going on. All right, going back. Now we're gonna try just creating some elements just to get us started, and we're gonna just start out with a basic shape. So to start out with a basic shape, let me go ahead and empty everything. When to draft, when to file. So this little message is letting me know that I can move my project to a team. I'm gonna go ahead and close that out for right now. Don't need to see that at the moment. All right, so right now I have no layers. The layers panel is empty. I'm gonna click on the little drop down on my page. Also, I forgot to mention, you have your different tools here in the toolbar. You'll click on the icon to select it, or if you want, you can click on the little arrow that's next to it to be able to see the tools that are underneath it. So in case you're wondering how I was viewing the tools that were underneath it, that is how I was able to access those. So first I have my move tool. I'll click on the pages and I'll be able to see that I have page 1. So I'm gonna go ahead and you can either double click into that or go ahead and right click and rename page. And then I can call this design page. Now that's pretty cool. One thing that I'll mention as well, if you're on Mac, it is Control Command Space. If you're on Windows, it is Windows key period, just like so. And then you can pull up emojis, and the emojis you can actually add into your naming convention as well. And this is pretty cool because this allows you to, let's add this little stop sign here. This allows you to add some emojis which can be a little more iconic, so that you can tell at an easier glance what your page is. So if I have this little stop sign here and people are able to recognize it, it might just look more like a red circle. In this case, let me go ahead and change it to a different one, a little more noticeable. I'm just going to use this X here. Okay, so if I use the X, then if someone has multiple pages, then you can see more at a glance which pages you might want to touch and which ones you might want to avoid. That can be very useful. So if you need to delete pages, right click, delete, delete, and delete. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and just name this design page. That's just a little tip to add the emojis to it. Makes life a lot easier. Getting back to the demo. So go ahead, move from the move tool to the rectangle tool. You can either click on the rectangle or you can click R, and that will bring up your rectangle tool. Now, once I start drawing the rectangle, then you'll notice that I actually have hotkeys. You'll notice that I actually have some properties on the side. Let me go ahead and no properties, properties. So with the properties here, I'm able to see that my square that I just drew is actually not a square. Let's take a look. The width is 376 and the height is 354. So if I wanted to make this a square, I can go ahead and I'm just going to change the width, size it down a little bit to 354. Now both are the same width and height. So from what I'm seeing on the panel on the side, I can see the X and Y coordinates, the width and height. There's an angle. This is rotation. There's a corner radius. There's layer properties. This is similar to Photoshop, how we had the blend modes, and the blend modes allow us to do different things. Luckily, Figma has integrated the preview when hovering over a blend mode, and you're able to see that different blend modes have different effects. Even though the square, which is a grayish color, so moving it one more down, the fill will allow us to pick a color. And now you can see that we can change the color by clicking on the square and moving about. You can change it via the number, the hex number. You can also change the opacity of this via either the number here, change the opacity of this fill color itself. There's two different 100s if you notice. There's one for the layer and one for the fill. We'll take a look later at making an effect where this distinction comes in handy, but for right now you can either change it, click on the number and you can change it, or if you can get this, it's a little bit easier on Mac, it's a little janky on PC. This little arrow, double-sided arrow, that you can actually adjust down just by dragging up and dragging down. Also, you have your hide and show and a remove icon to get rid of the fill. So our square is actually still there. We just got rid of the fill. So we'll bring that fill back by clicking on the plus. And so you can also add a stroke. This one's hard to see. Let me go ahead and turn up the color. It's on the inside of the object, as well as we'll just make it a little bit wider. So now our shape has a fill and a stroke, as well as we can also add effects. I'll go ahead and just throw that on. Very difficult to see, but it does have a drop shadow here. By clicking on the little sunshine icon, then you can go ahead and change factors about this. So with this, we can change the color, we can change the positioning, the blur, the spread, and this will, change how our shadow here is showing up. But right now, it does have a shadow. It is there. And we can also remove that, as well as if we wanted to export this object, we can go ahead and click export, and it will allow us to save this as something else. So that's making a shape, and those are some of the properties that exist with the shape. Let me go ahead and for our next demo, we're making text. So to make text, we want to go ahead and select the text tool, or T on the keyboard, and then you can click. And similarly, we have many different properties on the side. Let me go ahead and just write some text here. All right, great. And Figma's default font is Enter. So And Figma is integrated with Google Fonts, which is very cool because then you get access to all the Google Fonts and that library. So with that, let's go ahead and let's just make it impact. That's fine. So we'll change it from enter to impact by clicking on the word. Everything above the text properties here is basically the same. You have your position, sizing, although we can't directly manipulate the width and the height. You are able to change the size just by going down into the text properties area and then clicking on size. Again, you can either find your way to the double-sided arrow and scale it up or scale it down, or you can click and just type it in. You'll also have some other text things like leading, kerning, paragraph spacing, your auto width, auto height, fixed size. So those are some key ones that we'll take a look at as we get a little bit more into this, as well as left, center, right adjusted, your alignment for the tool, some extra options underneath the dot, the ellipse, and you can also change the color again to something that's pleasing. You also have your other options like stroke effects and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll work exactly the same as with shapes, sometimes they won't, and so you just have to, let's see if it does actually. Get rid of that stroke for the drop shadow. All right, this is one that I'm talking about. For the square, our effect for drop shadow, our spread is possible. For the text, it's not possible. So sometimes you have limited abilities and access to some of these features, but that's okay. We just work within constraints, and there's other ways to get around it. We just have to get creative after that point. But that's the basics of font there, or rather text. Took a little look at creating a font when we selected impact, but that's just creating a text. So now we have frames, and these are going to be a major part about designing, and especially UX design. So with that, we're going to go ahead and create our first frame. So in between the move key, the move arrow, and the rectangle tool is the frame. And with that, you're able to draw out essentially what is a rectangle, but it has different properties from the rectangle. So let me go ahead and show you. So with this frame, now if you look as I select between the rectangle that we made, and I'll get rid of this drop shadow, the rectangle and the frame, you'll see a couple different options here, such as auto layout, layout grid, clip content. There's not too many. There's different options for selecting a frame in case you need to just quickly select a standard frame size. So they have a few for iPhone, for Apple Watch, letter size, tabloid, different things like that. But for the most part, you can just draw a frame, create it yourself, unless you know exactly what size you want to work with. Go ahead again, type in the width and height, etc. So the frame is very useful because it's going to be what we're working on whenever we're making our designs, and especially for prototyping. So if you ever are in a situation where you're trying to prototype, and this is just going to be just a quick demo of nothing really. If you're ever in the prototype and you're wondering why you don't have prototyping options available, it's because it's not part of a frame. Let me show you. When I click on this frame, I'll see little dots show up, and I can actually drag those out. Those allow me to drag to any other frame, and with that I can create a prototype that will move from one frame to another. So let me just do that. So frame 1 will be a red color, frame 2 will be a bluish color, and once I activate this, once I play it, then I can move from one frame to another. And that's the basic gist of prototyping. We'll get more into this and we'll make more intricate prototypes as we go along, but that's the basic idea. So frames aren't too different from just regular squares at first glance. They are indeed, though, more powerful. And this gets us into our next topic in Figma. Everything is a group. So what that means, there's different groupings in Figma, and if you're new to Figma, you might not understand that it feels a little bit different. If you're coming from different program like Sketch, then you might feel everything looks about the same, but it doesn't feel the same for some reason. And if you're feeling that, you're not alone. You're not going crazy. Everything looks and is almost the same, but isn't exactly the same. And the reason for that is that Figma treats everything basically as a group. So you have groups, which is just going to be a collection of multiple objects. We'll take a look at that in a second. You have sections. We'll just glance over that quickly. It's probably the most useless of all four that are listed here. And you also have frames, which is the square that we just drew a second ago. These are going to be your artboards. In Figma, or in any other program, they use artboards. In Figma, they use frames. And again, artboards are different from frames because everything in Figma is essentially a group. Just remember that. And then we have auto layout. Now, auto layout itself isn't actually an object or a means of grouping like that. Everything else you can use as the container to group things. Auto layout is a property that we can add to a frame in order to enhance its abilities, and it will help us to create more dynamic and more reusable content later down the line. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. So again, group, frame, and auto layout are going to be your main players here. Also, up in the corner, I have a little link that goes to uiprep.com, and it has a little article like why you should use frames versus groups. So when it comes to this, groups are the most basic version of gathering different objects together. Frames are going to be far more powerful. We'll take a look at that. So like I said, Figma's built different. If you're coming from something like Sketch, then it'll feel just a little bit off, even though it works almost exactly the same. And one of the reasons for this is that because everything is a group and nothing is necessarily an artboard, we only have frames, we don't have artboards, we're working with objects that can easily nest within one another. So if you put a group of something into another group, let's say you're packing, you're moving house, and you have a bag of marbles. You're not just gonna have one marble, you're going to get the entire group of marbles and you're gonna put them in a bag, and so you have all of your marbles there. But the marbles aren't the only toys that you have. You have some jacks, you have some playing cards, all that kind of stuff. And what do? You put that in an even bigger box and you group those things together. You call the box, label it toys or games or whatever else, and then you're ready to move based on having collectivized those things. So you're able to put the group of marbles into a larger grouping of toys. Now in something like Sketch, they used to allow, one of the hacks that my coworkers used to do was put artboards on top of bigger artboards. So they put multiple artboards on top of one large artboard, and then that way they could export the entire thing, because Sketch used to see that the artboard had a bunch of other objects on top of it. Sketch actually fixed that bug and made it so that artboards wouldn't capture overlapping artboards anymore. Figma is built in the exact opposite direction, where they allow that. They want you to put frames on top of frames on top of frames. And so that's basically what we're working with where we're not dealing with artboards with limitations like that. We're dealing with frames that are groups that allow you to group groups together, group other groups with other groups. So in our mental model, we just want to know that a group is a basic grouping, frames are going to be super groups, and then auto layout creates magic groups. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we have right now 2 frames, and you actually notice too that the frames have a name above them. So they're not, the squares do not have a name. Hello world is just text, but the frame has a name above it. It's frame 1 and frame 2. Now when we have our object, and if you look on the left side here, you'll notice that we have in our layers panel, now it's populated, frame 2, frame 1. It's just populated in the order that we created it, with most likely the last thing on top. But we can also reorder it just by clicking on it and dragging it around. And so we can even put other things inside of certain things. So now you'll see that our frame 2, so in case you were trying to move it and you got lost, something got lost, frame 2 is accidentally inside frame 1. So it's still here, we just need to move it over, and you can see how frames accept other frames inside of them. So we'll move this actually out of frame 1. So now it's just behind it. You can see its name existing back there because it's a different object. So now we have our layers panel, and it has some objects. Same thing, we'll be able to move some of these objects onto a frame, and you'll notice that as we move them, just like with frame 2, these things aren't keeping their same properties. So our square is looking more like a rectangle, and why is it getting cut off? Well, if we click on our frame 1, you'll notice what we mentioned a moment ago, clip content. This clip content is checked, and that allows your frame to contain and only show what exists within the frame parameters. So the frame is only 526 high, and our square extends beyond that. So with that, it's able to clip it so that it doesn't show all the way through. So that's pretty much the idea behind frames. Now, if we have, let me just go ahead and create a couple objects here. It's red, get one that's blue. Actually make one that, by clicking Shift X, you're able to flip-flop the stroke and the fill. We'll make one that's this right here. Again, if you can get that double arrow, you can just simply drag. And then we'll make one more that, actually, let's do a corner radius on this one. So we have a square here, and if we go up to our corner radius, again, dragging is the easiest. You can actually, if it shows, well, I'll have to get a little bit closer here. You'll see that our square is no longer a square. So you can also use these little handles here. These allow you to do the same thing. And you can even change one at a time. We'll take a look at that in a second, just for the demonstration. I'm just gonna make this, turn the corner radius all the way up, and we basically made it a circle. So this is still a square. It's still called rectangle 3, but our corner radius is so high that it brought the corners all the way in to the point where it looks like a circle. So now, grabbing all of these shapes that we just made and changing one of them to an actual different color, we're able to press Control G, Command G if you're on a Mac, or we can also go up. So you'll notice that we sometimes in other programs you'll have a file, an edit, a view button, and stuff like that. We don't seem to have that here, and you might be a little confused as to where to find that. Well, it's actually underneath, and if you noticed in the presentation earlier, I highlighted the entire toolbar, including this little Figma. So this is your main menu, the one that usually has things like file, with file, save local copy. They allow you to save on your desktop and stuff like that. They save in the cloud for you, so you don't have to ever press save, but they do allow you to save, export, edit, your undo, your redo, your copy, paste, all those things. That's located over here. And so if you wanted to, you can click on the Figma F and go to object, and should be around here somewhere. Well, here it is. Ungroup selection. It says Control Backspace. But I use Control Shift G, so that's another one to use. But group selection is also an option. Do I already have a group? Yes, I do. If I want to, I can just ungroup it. And again, you can either press Command G or Control G, or go to File, Object, and Group Selection. And what this does now, this allows us to move our objects together. And this can be a little bit useful just because it keeps objects that you want grouped together. There is actually an auto layout available for the group. And so you can, but if you'll notice, it turned it into a frame. So Figma likes to mix and mingle these different things, these different properties. So if I want, I can turn this back into a group. Now they're still in a certain order just because we have the auto layout on, but for the most part, this is now back to a group, and it can't have auto layout. It can just kind of contain some objects. So I can move the objects around. I can even pull them apart, and it'll keep them proportionate. It squashes and stretches. Not ideal, but that's how a group works. It'll at least keep my stuff together. One more. Okay, there we go. Now we also have frames. So a moment ago, we accidentally made a frame of it, and you can, again, will allow me to convert to section. It will allow me, okay, so convert to frame. This one might just rotate in a way, but you can change more, pretty easily from groups to frames to sections. And that's basically how you do it. Now, we have this frame. As you'll notice, it doesn't really look like a frame. It looks like a group. And the way that we can make it look more like a frame, we can add a fill to it. So now it looks like an artboard or a canvas where we can actually add our designs to it. And we can start, designing something that looks a little nice. Looks a little more like what we're trying to get to when we're thinking about, creating a design. Maybe we're thinking about a mobile app. Maybe we're thinking about a website, something along those lines. But this is basically how we'll go about doing that. And so with our frame, we're able to do essentially everything we can do with a group. We're able to move this stuff around. But we're also able to do a little bit more. So just to show this, I'm going to select the frame. And I'm going to add an auto layout. So the frame is a super group. Groups were very simple. Frames were super groups. They allow us to do even more. And then auto layouts are magic groups. And as you can see with the little pink diagonal lines, the auto layout, which was a property applied to the frame, allows us to kind of keep things a little more spaced evenly. In this case, we're doing it up and down. We can also do it left to right. Shift 1 if you want to zoom out and see all your objects at once. But we're able to kind of get an idea of what this auto layout is doing just by by playing with it a little bit, but 2, by seeing that it's kind of keeping things in line. And that, at first, that can be a little bit intimidating. It's magical. It allows us to have multiple objects, and as you can see, it's messing some things up. It's getting a little weird. And it's not allowing me, if I take this square, I can easily drag it, 2 pixels to the right, 2 pixels to the left. This dotted line that I'm looking at for this circle, it won't allow me to move this in the same way that I was moving it a moment ago. It only allows me to kind of reorder some things. And this can be very useful for keeping our content, as it needs to be. So if you're thinking of, chips or like little filters, or let's say even list items. So let's go ahead and, if we're making like a grocery list, we can go ahead and make a couple items here. Now in this case, they're all going to be evenly spaced. So let me go ahead and not evenly space it for a second, just to show you this. So when we have our objects, we also have just above the XY coordinates, we also have some alignment tools. We saw a couple of these, I think, in Photoshop and even in Google Slides. Many programs have them. But we're able to also, in this case, I'm just going to press the tidy up, and then I'm going to press this left align. The tidy up did a good job of creating this spacing. We didn't have this spacing, object spacing, a moment ago. That wasn't there. But when I pressed tidy up, now it appears and allows me to, change the spacing in between the different objects, as well as you can, just kind of press this little handle here, as well as, let me go ahead and actually, I could do it one at a time. I'm actually going to just do it fancy, and random numbers is fine. Actually, no, I need to do a different way. So just to kind of demonstrate how this works, we can also use some plugins. And so we'll browse the community. So now if you notice, before I mentioned our home tab and our community tab, I've moved over into the community tab, and I want sequential text. This is one that I like. We don't need the try it out. We can actually search it from over here. So same thing here. So the community tab allows us to see the entire community of what's going on in Figma, and with like plugins and different forums and stuff like that. We can also just search with our overlay here, sequential text, and press run, and this will allow me to select different objects and list item. And now this particular plugin, you can read more of the details on your own just by clicking on it, and not by clicking on run, but by clicking on either the gray area or the ... But this allows you to create sequential number sequences and a little bit of text. So the list item, it just interprets that as just a value, and then the one, it's able to interpret, oh, okay, you want me to start counting from 1, 2, 3, etc. So now, more easily, I was able to use a plugin instead of having to double click into each of these and rename each of these items. I just used a plugin that allowed me to do it a little bit quicker. So select all 5 of them, and then I'm going to press Option and A, or you can press the left align up here, which is Alt or Option A, and now they're back in line. So this is really great. I'm way off track from where I started, which was that auto layout is a pretty cool thing. But let me go ahead and duplicate list item 5, just call it 6, and now you'll see that just by duplicating it, dragging it out, and creating a new item, I was able to make another list item. But now I have to go ahead and repeat all the process. Go ahead and tidy up. I want to shift that over again. Go ahead and tidy up my items and make sure that they're 70, in this case 72 spaces from each other, and yada yada. And if I hadn't dragged it straight down, then I might have to left align it again and all this type of stuff. But based on this, I can go ahead and select the items, do an auto layout, which again created a frame. Frames can have auto layouts, other things can't. So frames are super, and auto layout makes it magic. And now when I want to make list item 7, again, the auto layout restricts me from how I can move each item, but it allows me to drag out another item and simply have it be exactly where it needs to be. And then you can even go in and change properties. Maybe these need to be a little bit tighter together. Maybe Let me go ahead and give this a fill. I'm gonna just turn the fill down a little bit. So maybe you need more spacing in between. Let's say that you had another object that's going to be here, and instead of bumping it right up against it, if I were to, want to do something like that, maybe instead I want to give my frame a little bit more padding, in this case top and bottom. So now there's a little bit of space there. So if I bump up this square to the bottom of this auto layout frame, then that gives me a little bit more spacing there, so I don't have to worry too much about my objects being a little too close together. So that is just a brief demonstration of auto layout. Auto layout gets more complex, but can be a lot cooler in a way. And we'll get into that, at a later time. But for right now, that's just a little taste of what's going on here. So we're going to move and end up saving our project here. So let's move back to the home screen, where we'll create a team. So remember, teams are not folders. Teams are collaborative spaces. So for this, I'm going to go down to create new team, and it'll tell you some stuff about, trying to sign up for Pro and all that kind of stuff. Don't worry about that. Create team, and we'll call this DesignersCorner demo. And so I can create the team. It'll ask you if you want to add any collaborators right now. Again, the team is the space, not the folder. I'm going to skip for now. It'll ask you, if you're using the free one, to if you want to choose a more professional version. In this case, I'm just going to choose starter, the free one. And the free allows you to have as many teams as you want, I believe, but only up to 3 projects. And the design files in the projects are limited to just 3 pages. So if there's some limitations, there's some restrictions there. It tries to keep it, wants you to buy the full version, and that's okay. But basically what it does is creates DesignerCorner demo, and we have our team project. This is the folder inside. So you can also access it here. If you are hovering over these, it's trying to prompt you to make a design file, or I can just click on the larger square here to go into it, double click on it. So now I'm in team project. I can add a description if I want. I can copy the link, move it somewhere else, rename, remove. This one's in favorites, apparently, remove from favorites, or delete it. But you can also go ahead, before I move too far into the file, go back up to the team here, and I can actually add need to find where I saved it again. I believed I saved it in this one. Okay, I can actually add an icon of my own in case you're trying to keep your teams a little more organized. From what I saw when trying to do this, they allow you to change the icon, but I haven't found a way to delete the icon, so I don't think that Figma allows that, which is kind of an oversight. But point being, you can add a little icon there, as well as stepping one step further into the team project. Now I get my options back for create a new design file. In this case, I'm going to actually go back to the design file that we have open, and what we're going to do is so we've already created a team, we've already created a project. So the team is a collaborative space, the project is a folder that holds different design files. And so now we're going to actually name and move the file that we were working with previously. So we'll go ahead, come into here, and if you'll notice from this screenshot, I've labeled it, name it, and move it. So we should be able to click on where it says Untitled. Our file right now is called Untitled, and it should be located in drafts. And to move it, you'll click on the down arrow and move it to a project. However, if I look up into the middle screen, in the middle of the taskbar there, the toolbar, I don't see those options. They should be sitting right there in the middle. And so what's going on here is it's contextually based. So if I'm selected onto different objects, such as the frame or the rectangle or the text here, it will give me some different options. But if I click into the negative space here, some empty space in the design file, now I get that back. So if you're not seeing drafts and untitled there, then go ahead and just click in the empty space and it will bring it back to you. So if in case this is your first time using Figma and you were a little confused, that's how that works. So if you click on untitled, let me just call this one title document. So now we've given it a title, but it's still located in drafts. So if I wanted to, share it with the team that I would have added if I had added anyone else to the DesigneCorner's demo, then what I want to do is click on the down arrow. You'll get some options: show version history, export. You can duplicate it, rename it, move to project, favorite, and delete. So in this case, I'm going to go move to project. And now I have my options here. Currently it's in drafts. You can see that drafts is selected, but I can either make a new project based on the DesignersCorner demo just by using the plus icon. I've already made my team project here, which if we want to, we can rename that too, but the team project folder is where we want to go. You'll also see all of your other teams, and you'll even be able to make a new team just in case you wanted to. But I want to move from drafts to the team project folder in DesignersCorner demo. Remember, you're not saving it to the team, you're saving it to the project. So click on that and move. And once it updates, you'll see now it's moved from drafts to team project / title document, and it lets us know that we're using the free version. So free, it limits you to 3 free files created, starter plans, blah, 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 and tells you can do more with other options, other payment plans. But this is just to kind of get you started here. Now, that's going to be the end of our tutorial, just to kind of bring us up to speed with Figma. There's a lot more that we're going to end up covering with this, but for right now, that's the main point of what we're doing here. Just kind of getting our feet wet. We'll start creating an actual project probably next time, and we'll start exploring some of the more intricate details of things like auto layout. We'll look at components. We might even look at styles and maybe variables. We might even look at variables too. Those are something new that once we kind of understand what components are, and some other things like that, these are just reusable elements that will allow us to navigate Figma a little bit easier, so we don't have to take the hard road the entire time. So with that, we now have some Photoshop, some Google Slides, and some Figma under our belt. So that is exciting news. Go ahead and celebrate. We're going to learn a lot more. We're going to actually, figure out some things on how to actually make a good looking project based on this stuff. But for right now, just dipping your toes into the water, just getting a taste of everything, that is what's going to be the real secret to success here, and what allows you to actually put this stuff on your resume and say, hey, I took a look at the program, I learned a little bit about it. If you need to know a thing or two, you might be able to ask me. And so on your own, you can probably try and navigate some of these waters, but we're definitely going to be doing some bigger, better stuff coming up in the next couple weeks. So thank you very much for joining us for this session of Designer's Corner. I hope you learned something. Hope you learned a little bit of Figma. We're really getting into the meat of it now, because this is where we want to be, understanding a little bit of Photoshop, understanding a little bit of how some Photoshop stuff works, understanding Google Slides and some presentation. That stuff is good for understanding some of the outer skirts of the trade here, but this is where the bulk of our time will be spent. And so doing this, working in Figma will be great experience to be able to add to your resume and say, I know how to actually UX design. So remember, everything is UX design. It's all just part of the user experience. Anything that we've learned so far, Photoshop or Google Slides, it all helps to create a better experience. But this is what's going to be part of our mobile apps, part of our web design, and things that probably the developers will use when you're actually working on a bigger team. So remember to go ahead, like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content. And, thanks so much for showing up. Love you guys, and we'll see you next time. Again, as always, I'm going to post the the presentation into the description area. So go ahead and, check out any of the links to any of the other stuff that you might want to monkey around with as well. Again, all the files, all the programs are basically the same. So if you want to learn a little bit about, any of this stuff, now you have a foundation with Photoshop, Google Slides, and Figma under your belt. You now know the trades of graphic design, UX design, and even a little bit of presentation. So go ahead and go crazy. I'll see you next time. Take care.